Hi everyone, my name's Chris Kerr. I'm corporate partner and head of our marine economy group at Harper McLeod. In the latest of our In Conversation With pieces, I'm delighted to say I've got Colin McMurray, who is the Group Managing Director of Stream Marine Training. For those who have seen any of our other pieces, our aim here is to meet some interesting personalities across the marine economy or bring you some interesting stories as to what's going on in the marine economy. So, Colin, hi, thanks for joining me.
Hi, good morning, Chris. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thanks, yeah.
Good. So, you and I have known each other for a number of years now, Colin, and so therefore I have the benefit of knowing that you have got quite an interesting background of going from kind of seafarer, but probably more then into business. Do you want to just give us a wee plotted history of...
Yes, certainly. I went to sea in 1994, came across from Northern Ireland to start at the city, what's known now as the City of Glasgow College, to do my training. The process was a 3-year cadetship that was sponsored by BP Shipping. I came through that, stayed at sea for a number of years, and then moved on to fast ferries, which was the SeaCat run between Belfast and Troon and Belfast and Heysham. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I suppose at the time it felt like Formula One of shipping. Everybody said to me you get bored in ferries, but there was always something different on a different day. So it was particularly exciting and a really good company to work for. But in that process, I started getting engaged in training and was involved in some of the fleet training of the crew. And that really sort of, I suppose, whetted my appetite to continue that process. And in 2004, I came ashore into Clyde Marine Training and came in there just basically as a sort of office manager and worked my way through eventually becoming general manager. And then in 2008, we did a management buyout. And that was probably the start of, really getting involved in the business side of Element. We then developed the company over the next sort of probably 4 or 5 years. We did some acquisitions, we did some demergers, we grew organically, started new companies, right up to the point in 2016 when we sold the company to Sten AB, their company Northern Marine, and it remains integrated as part of that. I stayed on for 4 years nearly to grow what's Clyde Training Solutions. So we started that from a brownfield site, and after 4 years, decided it was time for a sort of new adventure, something with a challenge, and I came across the Stream Marine Training in July 2020. So more or less in the middle of COVID, which is another time to change rules.
It might be too broad a question, but in your time when you've been involved in training, it strikes me as an area that must always be changing, but what are the particular points to pull out of the biggest change that's going on in that part of your career?
I think probably the biggest change we've seen is probably in the last year. If you look really back at how the world had to change with online events and training programs, that really was a crux. So going from what is normally classroom-based training right the way through to, how much can you do in webinars? And I think everybody in the industry has probably tested that. I think the MCA deserves credit for probably running that through fairly quickly. And we were one of the first companies across here to get a lot of those webinars up and running. And they've been very successful. It's changed the dynamics, obviously, of a course. But I think if you look at the industry in its entirety, probably the maritime industry training hasn't really changed up to this point. If you look at cadet training, it hasn't changed in the last 40, 50 years. I think we're getting to that point now. If you look at the Maritime Skills Commission, of which I'm a commissioner, it's recently released its report on maritime education and how that needs to change, what it needs to fulfill, because we're, the rapid change in the industry through the fuel technology side, through the bridge technology and equipment, right through to autonomous and semi-autonomous shipping, which continues to be talked about and featured. So I think probably the biggest changes in our industry are probably likely still to come.
And just on the basis that I think it would be a fair assumption to assume that training in your industry there must be a big practical element to it, in terms of being linked to offshore and to water and to vessels. How do you overcome that if you're teaching online?
Well, some of them haven't been able to go online. That practical element still exists very much so. Where you've got a classroom or theory based, yes, you can change that and put that into a webinar format. Some of it can be done, sort of in a hybrid type environment, but you'll always need that practical experience. So the dynamic in that element hasn't changed. So we opened up very quickly after the first lockdown, being a supporter to key workers. And we were doing a lot of training for some of the local ferry companies. So we were allowed, and again, we had to scale everything back, social distancing, all the social protocols that had to be put in place and safety protocols. So we did open and we ran. And yeah, it's been unique because as most people have been working at home, most of us have been in the office in challenging times right through from last year.
So tell me if we shift focus then to what's going on now. So tell me about Stream Marine and where you're taking that business.
Yeah, it's been an interesting one coming in the middle of COVID. It's certainly a challenge because you're coming basically from a point of unlocking the business into looking at every single aspect about what we can do and what we can change. And the business has been around for about 5 years in its form, and what we wanted to do was just fundamentally change everything and take it from probably an owner-led and very successful entrepreneur and business to take it to that next stage of growth. So we've really focused on a lot of the systems and processes. We've managed to get our QA system in place. We put that in October last year. So we're now fully QA approved and running that. We have put in the booking systems. We've changed our website. And we've got a customer-focused system as well, which captures all communications with all customers. And yeah, we've changed quite a lot. It's one of those things when you keep looking back the way you can see all the change, but still what we're trying to improve. And it's taken all the experience and a really good team around me that makes that happen. And we've been really fortunate with who we've got here and what we're being able to do. And there's a lot of success stories still to come. We're looking, obviously, we concentrate mainly in the maritime market, but there's other areas which we're going to move into, such as a GWO and a PETO, and they're in process at the moment. So that will add to the portfolio of the business and allow us to continue to expand. The careers business that we have in the cadet program, we've already doubled the numbers of cadets that we've got under management. We expect that to move fairly quickly in the next year as well. And again, that's something that I'm particularly keen on. The industry requires people coming through all the time, and training is an important part of that. So the business is it's similar in nature, I suppose, to what I did at Clyde, but I suppose it's slightly different in its capacity and capability. And I think that's where the spread that we're able to do across the business is probably a little bit greater.
And just on the cadet side of things, then, so give us some stats around number of cadets that go on to jobs in the maritime industry, or whether they're onshore, offshore, or is there a high dropout rate?
Yeah, the high dropout rate tends to be in the first C phase. So it's one of those career paths where people come in with some expectations. The reality can sometimes be different, but for those that do go through and complete the training, there's a huge opportunity in the maritime industry. And I think what I've seen the change over the last maybe 15, 20 years really comes down to how that's advertised. It's not a career in shipping, it's a career in the maritime industry. And it's really opening up those opportunities. And I suppose that in the days of old, people knew people that went and joined the Merchant Navy. I was reading the other day that Nick Nairn was actually in the Merchant Navy before he became a chef. And some of the inspiration that he received was because he visited all the different countries. So, it's amazing the number of people that you meet that used to be at sea, but maybe aren't in the maritime industry. What we're trying to focus on now, probably as a wider body, is its careers in the maritime industry. So people are aware when they come in, your career at sea, you may want to go and be a captain or a chief engineer, but you may, or an ETO, but you may well want to come ashore and use your skill set into some of the other areas in industry. And it's really opening that up so that people are aware of what those possibilities are. Maritime law, is a good example. We know someone, for example, Katie Womersley, who's the operations director of the careers company. Her sister's a maritime lawyer in London. We have other people that have gone across and moved career paths and taken those opportunities. So it's really about what paths people would like to follow. So it's not just a short-term career at sea, it's a wider, longer-term career in the maritime industry. Because when you train people and you invest in them, you want to keep them in the industry.
Yeah. And just talking about then taking it back the way about the industry generally, being based in Glasgow, you will be only too aware that there's a big event coming up in October, November. I think we're almost 50 days to go to COP26. Quite a heavy focus on some of the sessions anyway that I've looked at around kind of, greening and decarbonisation of shipping and maritime more generally. So what are you doing around that whole piece?
Yeah, I mean, maritime sometimes get a little bit of bad press. I was listening to a radio program the other week, and someone had called in and said, "Yeah, we should be getting rid of all these ships. They're the real polluters." I mean, maritime shipping contributes about 3% of annual carbon dioxide, and that's figures from the IMO. But the big change came in 2018 when the idea was to reduce 50% from 2018 figure to 2050. So to meet that target, obviously the industry has to completely change its approach. You have to look at oil and diesel alternatives, new ship designs, etc. So as a company, how we've manufactured ourselves into that process is looking at the likes of the gas. So LNG is the big one at the moment, and LNG's been the primarily focus. A lot of ships have coming out. It's ironic that I used to work in an LNG tanker when in the sort of 1998, 1999, and we were using boil-off gas as a dual fuel on the ship, and that concept has now sort of crept back in a number of areas. But the likes of cruise ships coming out, the number of ferries, etc., that are coming. So shipping in general is moving towards LNG as the next sort of reduction in emissions. So as a company, we were very quick off the mark into that area. We've been fortunate to have some key staff that are very well versed in that. And basically it came down to the IGF training. And that's really, it's a bit of a mouthful, which is why it's called IGF. But basically the whole process, well, I'll give you the explanation. IGF, so it's the International Code of Safety for Ships Using Gases or Other Low Flashpoint Fuels, shortened to the IGF.
I can understand the reason for the abbreviation.
So everybody uses IGF as a short, and basically there's two levels of that. There's a basic training and an advanced training, and the basic training is for those that are going to be on board the ship, basic use or care and emergency response type things, and then there's a more advanced course which is really for the master's engineering team and those dealing with the fuel on a continuous basis. So we were very quick into that training. In fact, so quick that we trained a number of the staff in the actual authorities that are going to be governing it. And we've used that as a stepping stone to be fairly broad. I mean, we've had a number of large cruise companies coming through training programs in the last couple of weeks, sending their senior team in. And we're also looking at advancing that into the next stage because we can see gaps in the market, not just for training crews and things, but there's also additional training that we think can be done really just to broaden everybody's understanding. This is a fairly new concept for a lot of people and a lot of companies, and therefore there's safety requirements, build requirements, and everything that goes with that. So the more experience we can pass out into the industry, the safer that'll be. But that's probably just the first stage of it. The second stage of it is then looking at things right the way through to, ammonia is coming up, why people are looking at ammonia. Again, you say ammonia, most people think back to their sort of chemistry type classes, but it's there's no carbon dioxide when it's burnt. It's fairly abundant. Can be made with natural resources and such as electricity and renewable energy can create it through with water, etc. So it's possible to do it. It doesn't have the same sort of density, etc. of batteries, which is the other one. But where that goes to, we'll have to see. And then, of course, there's hydrogen, and that's another one that's been looked at in the industry is a future. There's obviously big lessons on how you have to deal with hydrogen. Again, it's a fairly clean, easily created, but obviously creates its own problems with storage and things on board. So there's those.
If I go back to the point about training, the training programs are constantly being adapted to take account of these new fuels, and when you've got customers, clients, organisations approaching you, do you find that there are more questions coming from them about what your credentials are or what you're offering on a kind of ESG/green credentials basis?
Not so much in that. I think probably word of mouth has actually crept through on a lot of how we've done it. I suppose the team of people that we have actually, do a lot more than just instructors. They're actually immersed within that side of the industry and business. It's consultants and things that we've used that are part of the team. This sort of thing, you have to be, you're a specialist in this area. This is not something that you just come across. So the likes of when we're speaking to these companies and clients, that it really is the people at the top of their game that are involved in both the creation of these courses. So when they're asking the questions, it's not just it's not even one way, it's the other way. It's what has your company done about this? What has your company thought about this? What are your procedures? So there's an awful lot in and around that. And I think, to me, that's always the best way type of training, when you're getting that flow. If it's one way, it's not really, it's almost like a sort of lecture type approach. If you can engage the audience and make sure everybody's interested in that field of, I suppose, the field view of what the topic is, then you'll have much more engagement. And again, you'll get the message across better as well.
And specifically on COP, then, is there anything that you're doing around that event?
Yeah, we've actually got a couple of things. We're doing a couple of things down at London International Shipping Week when we're down there, and on the COP26, there's obviously a theme around maritime, and we're just speaking to some of the team there to see how we can create that sort of get someone on in the, I suppose, in the lecture and the question and answer side, because it's still a fairly new topic. That's coming across. It's the industry's moving towards it, so there's still a lot of questions, and with the team that we have, as I say, it's very easy to move that forward and really engage with people to ask the right questions. It's not just a case of, well, we must do it at any cost. We must do it, but we must do it safely.
And so, reflecting on the last kind of 15 years or so, maybe slightly longer, from being on board the vessel to now being sitting at your desk in the maritime industry, what any kind of observations and or advice you would give to anyone who's thinking about coming on as a cadet at the moment? Yeah,
it's I've always been enthused with the industry and the career path. I think if you look at it and say you can go, it's the trunk of the tree. So the cadetship's the trunk of the tree, and the branches are all the different career paths you can take afterwards. And the further you go up, the more branches there are. So therefore, you get to your master's ticket, that opens more doors than what it would say with an officer of the watch ticket. But yeah, it's very much engaging people. Did I imagine? No, I thoroughly enjoyed being on board the ship. You got fantastic leave ratios. We were week on, week off at the time. You got 4 weeks annual leave, so you worked 5 months of the year. It's a great job. Why would anybody want to leave that? And I know some people have come ashore and they didn't enjoy the same, because it's I think when you've been through that process of time off, and it's speak to a lot of captains in the industry today. Maybe they're doing 12 weeks deep sea. They've got 12 weeks when they come off uninterrupted. Maybe they have to do a couple of courses, but there's no phone calls, there's no emails, and in this day and age when everything is constant 24-hour communication, answering emails and things, there's a lot to be said for that sort of peace of mind of just being off. And when we say off, we mean off. The industry. I have the impression that there's a couple of kind of events or world events that appear to me to have led to people realising the importance of shipping. You had the old Suez Canal incident. You've seen an impact as a result of various things going on a macro basis about delivery times and logistics. And I think that impacts upon people when they understand the reasons for that. And then, of course, things like piracy. And I think that kind of brings it to the fore as well. But do you sense that people are kind of almost becoming more alert to the importance of shipping and cargo haul by boat? Yeah, I think there is definitely an awakening of, oh, right, okay, so they don't come in on planes. I remember used to speak to people and talk about bananas. I think, they come in on a plane. No, they come on a ship for, sort of 4 weeks, whatever. And yeah, do you know what I would like? I like the fact that more people are understanding about the industry. I just like for it to be in a different way, because the only time we hear about the industry is when something's gone wrong. And that's really the Suez blocked up, the ship ran aground, the captain drove it into the bank. None of that's real. It's not even true. But there's all those things that come back round. So it would be really good to see the industry, portrayed in a positive way and reach the media for positive rather than negative stories. But, they say no, any press is better than no press, or bad press is as good. So, yeah, it's certainly highlighted to people. Maybe there's a bit more understanding and care taken. But I think the COVID has changed everybody's perception of how we do, what's important in life, what we should focus on. So I think maybe things will change for the better right across the board.
Well, look, on that positive note, Colin, I always enjoy our chats, so thank you for your time. It might be worthwhile checking back in post-COP just to see if you think that it delivered for the maritime industry. But in the meantime, thank you for your time and enjoyed the conversation.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Good to chat to you.
Thanks.